Welcome to this Stonewall tutorial. This structure of the Stonewall system, in which you can play in both white and black. The Stonewall attack with white and Stonewall defense with black, both of which provide you so much effective and brutal attacks if you are tactical players like me and you want to attack and be creative in the middle game. This is for you. If you want to take your chess to the next level, this is for you. And you know what? Great. It's easy to learn, easy to follow. You don't need to invest too much time because the principles are the same to almost any responses, just to understand the moves order and so on, all of which I explain in this ultimate tutorial, where I not only include just the main lines and the traditional setup and all that stuff, but also as a bonus in the end of the video, I include the most challenging responses to the Stonewall structure and what to do against it. So stay tuned. Here we start. Let's just start with a normal standard response of black, and then later I will show you the more complex and challenging responses. So d5, and you do the weird move e3. Kind of weird, you block your own bishop, which is one of the positional drawback of this opening, the only ones, that this dark bishop is kind of blocked because of the system, but it's worth it, especially in advanced level like up to 2200 and so. Okay, very usual move, knight f6, control this center. And now, the soon he does that, you move your bishop to d3, preventing him to come here. So often they don't do this right away, and instead, let's say they do something like e6, okay, freeing the dark bishop. You play first knight d2. Now you totally prevent him to land on e4, and this is important because you want always to strive for the best version of your Stonewall structure. You can go with different structure which are still playable, but you always want to strive under the circumstances to get the best structure you can and increase your chances to beat your opponent. Okay, so let's go with, let's say, bishop d6. What you see now, that he tried to control the center with strike of e5. That could also be with knight c6, also very typical move. And as soon as you see these moves, that he is preparing to control the center, okay, then you strike with the f4, the signature move of the Stonewall structure. Remember that. You will soon realize why. Let's say castles, you bring your other knight, very natural development. Now let's say he does c5, very typical move here. You want to break the center from the other side. And this is another principle in the Stonewall system. As soon as he plays c5, even if it's at the beginning in the first move after d4 like the Benoni, you always strike back with c3. Solidifying the center, the d4 point, a very important point here, because now if he takes, in this particular case you take with a c pawn because you don't want to lose the f pawn, but in all other scenarios strive for the optimal Stonewall structure in which you take with the e pawn and open the e file for you and the bishop that is a bit handicapped at this point. If he forces you to take with a c pawn, it's not the end of the world. You still have control over e5, but not many will take here. So then you continue with castle, and let's say he moves something like that, and then this is the moment you enter, and this is another signature move of the Stonewall system. You place your knight in e5. There, if he takes you with no matter what of his pieces, you take back always with the f pawn, not with the d pawn, with the f pawn, and then open the file for your rook, and all his minor pieces are locked down in the queen side, while you, developing your nasty attack on the king side, will get it very soon. Okay, so you played knight e5, and now he's a bit shocked. Oh no, his knight is ruining my life, and let's say he does something like that. I don't know, continues the pressure, but this is an artificial pressure. You should not be worried about that because you have these two pawns that guard this, and if he takes, you take with a pawn, and then you take. So you have this battery of strong dark pawns. that on the one hand protect you, and on the other hand helping you freeing your pieces for the nasty attack on the king side. And he is blocking the queen side. See that it's so devastating to face that as even as a good player with the black pieces. So now it's my turn, and what I do, I have two options. The more aggressive style, which is g4, g5, and then bringing the queen here with this devastating attack, or the more settled one but also aggressive, moving your rook to f3 and then rook to h3 and then your queen at some point to h5. It doesn't matter exactly here the order, but you can choose. You can do either this option or that option. Let's go. I like the most aggressive option, g4, especially in blitz games or rapid games online. And then maybe he does h6, very reasonable to prevent you from doing that. But first of all, you can still do that. And even worse, it's open up this diagonal. And now maybe he can take here, but then you can take here him. And then if he takes back, there you can even suck here. And then come back with unstoppable mate, check, check, and mate. Well, of course, this is just a silly response for black, but you will be surprised that many players play this h6 move, and you can just move it ahead and breaking your principle of the double pawn, protecting your knight. Don't be a bok, right? Think Stonewall, do the Stonewall no matter the response of black, but when he does some moves like this, don't afraid to break it and to lose this pawn by replacing the minor pieces here, because you already have your attack. At each point, obviously, if he takes here, and then you take here with the f pawn. And if you flee, then it's already game over. Okay, this is better here. And you can also move and give place for your rook to give check here. Okay, so this is just weak responses of black, but let's say he does something better. Let's say g6, afraiding from f5, and yeah, this is more reasonable approach, and also producing a space for the knight, a counter defense. So if you do that, he kind of do this. But then you have a couple of ideas. First, you can move this knight to the game, freeing up this bishop, and do something maneuver like this afterwards. This is more from positional standpoint, but also develop your attack. Bring your queen here and then over there, and maybe bring back the knight over here and doing some check here. You have all kind of ideas, or you can bring your rook over here to there. You don't need to be afraid of this diagonal because it's blocked, because if he takes, you always take with this, and this will be blocked, so your rook is safe on the side, helping you to the attack. So you have so much interesting ideas, and at some points some sacrifices that you can do to break his king side and put the final mating attack. But you should also be cautious, because if you are not precise against advanced players, you can lose step by step just by material or bad sacrifices, and don't be hurry and hazy with your attack. But generally, I've beaten like so many advanced and intermediate players, like up to 2000 and even 2100s. Above 2200, it's very difficult to win, because they will take over the positional gameplay of the dark bishop in white, or the white bishop if you play it with black. Okay. d4, the initial move, but then let's say he plays another move. If you play something like c5, like the Benoni attack, you don't take, you don't play other moves, you play c3. Remember, when he plays c5, immediately c3. So the order of the moves is important, at least in the beginning. Further down the attack, then you can play with it and create your own ideas. So if you play d5, you play e3. If you're trying to attack your queen, no problem. You block it with a knight. e6, no problem. Something like that. Then this move is very important here, because you want to break free this pin. Don't do that like a bok and lose your queen, especially in bullet and blitz. The move order is important, and in this case, you want to move that first, okay? Or even if you want to be more precise, to adhere with the original ideas of the fortress structure, then you continue with knight b to d2. So if he takes, you can take and then fulfill the idea of knight to e5, because this is the principle, the signature move of the Stonewall attack. So don't do that at this point. This is more precise. And then, let's say he castles, then you do this move. You want to release your queen, and then nothing can stop you from knight e5. So let's say he does something like that, h6. To prevent this, maybe you are going to go this way. And now this is threatened and he can move there, let's say. Here you can't do that, so don't do it. I checked your attention. Don't do that here because you have double attack, right? So here, for example, you can do a3 to build it slowly, the g4. Okay, this is one option. Another option you have is to bring the other knight to support this knight, and then bring the queen over here and maybe do something like that with a knight, and then break the system with the f-pawn, but bringing the rook to the f-file and creating some weakness over his light squares, and your attack can go on many different ways. So at this point you can be more creative, at least, but finish this move, signature move. Make sure that you made all this structure in the right order, otherwise he will break it. And then go or with the g4 or knight f3 in some variations, or in this variation when the bishop is out you can do h3 and then g4. Okay, this is kind of idea. And then somewhat you bring your queen over here. Be careful from this battery, right? But yeah, okay, you have many ideas here to attack, and this can be very, very challenging attack to face with the black pieces. Okay, another principle that you need to understand is a Stonewall attack with white, or with a Stonewall defense with black, we will touch about it also, is that if he does at some point, let's say in this middle gameplay, c4, you should not worry about that. Why? Because you can simply move to c2, and then it strengthens your fortress structure even more. Right? You see now they are even more strong and unbeatable and unbreakable, and you are not concerned about the tension that at least he has when he has the c5 pawns here, and he still have some tension, so you can break the center, which is another idea, by the way, in the Stonewall. We'll get that against the Indian defense. But if he does c5, he is just blocked all over the place, and you are just concerned about his king, and you can develop your thing and your ideas, same ideas, your queen, g-pawn, knight f3, maneuvering to h3 and so on, more with ease. And so, okay, this is another important point. Now let's touch about the drawback of this system, very minor one, which is the positional concession you make upon this dark square bishop, which is locked here, even if you develop nice attack and structure to defend yourself of the queen side. But here I will show you some slow idea but effective one to release this bishop to the queen side, and you can utilize these ideas as much as you like, especially if you play more advanced player, let's say 2100s and above. And also depends on the position and your set of ideas in this particular game. So in this case you don't want to do the classical because you will block it. In this case you will go here regardless if he enters here or no. By the way, if he enters here, you can always play it later, okay? And then he can copycat you. I will talk about it near the end of the video as the most advanced options for black against white, or the other side against the Stonewall system. But let's just play the usual stuff. Okay, c3, remember? And let's say bishop this there. Okay, castles, knight over here. And then instead of this idea, which is legit of course, and even good and precise to prevent him from going here, you can also move your bishop to d2 and maneuvering it over here to pin his knight. This is how you make it more active. And so let's say play something like that, you move over here. Be cautious because he can attack here, but then no problem. You can move your queen here, and if he does c4, you can always go back to c2. This is bad for him. And then, I don't know, you can release his knight or simply do this stuff. And now it's even more critical because you lose a piece. But so yeah, this is not a good move. Queen f6, but you can see how he need to be very precise with his move, not to fall into your traps and your attacking moves. And here you can just get it back and then make the signature move. Let's say he does something like that, then you can bring your bishop to here. Now you have a nice spin and you put into the game your very limited bishop from the start of the game. Now he's very active, so you are even better positioned than the traditional Stonewall. One last important thing I want to show you in the structure is d4, e3, and this is something you need to be prepared of because many players will play that. Bishop f5, right? In all the other variations we saw that I do this first. Like in the London, it can happen. What you do is simply bishop d3 anyways, and if he takes, well, it's not ideal, you want to put your bishop here, but if you replace it, you continue with the same ideas, same structure. Okay. And so on. Castle, castle. And then at some point you bring your knight to the very important spot. Now in case he's not going to take it, but rather play something like e6, then never take. Even though it can ruin his pawn structure, this is not the principle of the Stonewall structure because now he is dominating here. He can bring his knight to dominate here as well, like the copycat version, which is the strongest. So never take here, just wait until he take you. Continue with your... Now don't move here, because then he can take in a not that great structure. Even this is not the end of the world, you can still play it, but generally we don't want that. And you can just play queen e2, protect it, preparing this move, or doing like f4 right away. And continue as usual. And if he moves away, by the way, which is possible, you also don't want to take the same idea with the London with white. You don't want to open his rook to this file. So just keep waiting. He will take it or not. Your bishop is here. To prepare knight to d2, you can always go this. Alright. And now if he takes, you take. And if he moves this, which is not good, then he block all the structure and you are pretty well to go, even easier. Okay, so this is just a principle what to do against bishop f5, which is very typical. But Shachar, what happens if he doesn't respond with the traditional d5? And many players today play King's Indian, right? Knight f6, or even if they want to transpose back to the traditional queen gambit or d-pawn game, they still play first knight f6, and that's fine. So in this case, instead of playing all this knight f3, g3, c3, all this traditional move, you play with your same system, like a Bok in this case. Stick with this fortress building, even though the response is different. And this is the magic in this opening. It's an all-rounded structure that you can apply on almost any responses, even with the black pieces. Okay, let's say he plays g6, played. The same ideas, bishop d3, blocking him from going here. Let's say d6. Okay, preparing some striking back in the center. Remember f4, bishop g6, and you solidify your fortress, especially when you have the fianchetto development of the dark bishop, and you continue with your game. Okay, let's say he does something like that, preparing this or that. You move here, castle. Castle. Now the only difference, as you may notice, is that now you can move here, the signature move of your knight to control and do him all the problems, right? However, what you have in return is striking back to the center with this pawn at some point. So let's say he does c5, very typical move here. You can strike back with e4. If he does e5, you can take here and then open the file for the rook. Of course, it's not the traditional structure of the Stonewall. Don't be disappointed, even though I can't get you. But you also lose a pawn, right? So we will not do that. So c5 is more typical. And then at this point, you can strike now to the center with e4. You might want to wait. And if he takes, you take back, remember, with the e-pawn always. And then you can move your knight here and exchange pieces here and control the center and nice develop pieces. Different setup than the traditional Stonewall, but still we are playing chess here and this is a good start for you. Yeah, so c5, e4. Okay, this is even better than knight d2. So let's say he exchanged pawns, you're alright. He can do some now e5, but then he will lose a pawn, or like a6. Prevent you to go here, and then preparing his b5. So now you can just continue with your plan, with your development, bishop knight c3 or knight d2. You can also start your attack by giving a place for your rook, very common idea in many setups in chess, and then do like something like that and g4 and start to attack f5. So it's not the general structure of the Stonewall, but all your center is yours and you have a slight advantage according to the engine. So this was against the King's Indian or knight f6 responses. So remember, if he plays his pawn to d6 and he is not, or also in other cases he's still open to do f6 if he doesn't place the knight over here. Let's say he does something like that and he doesn't play knight f6 at any point. Let's say he does something like that, right? You still move your what you want to do. And if he does that, which is a positional concession, it's weakening his structure anyways. You don't have your signature move, but you have other options. You can still with your structure, and you can use this weakness now he has with e6 and his light squares. So you have the basic principles, the structure, the moves order to know what to do for each response with the white pieces starting with d4. But now let's flip the board and see how you can use the Stonewall defense. Still attack, but more slowly, yet still effective. Flip the board. Okay, so let's say he plays d4. Now remember, you can play that against almost any response of white. There is only one move you can play against, which is e4. You can play the start as you play the French defense. However, this is very tricky because as soon as you do d5, if he's not exchanging, if he exchange, you go to the exchange variation and you are good to go with the traditional Stonewall, right? f5, it looks a bit more weird, but you can still do it. However, there is one risk here. If he goes for the advanced variation of the French defense, then you are screwed. You are not screwed, but you are screwed in terms of developing your Stonewall structure. Because if you do f5 here, first he can take you en passant, but he can stay here, which is even better, and just go on. And you don't have this square to jump with your knight to further jump to e5, the signature move, remember. I don't recommend to do it again. e4, some players can play it even against e4, but it's not recommended. What you can play it against almost any other first move. d4 obviously, d5, Queen's Gambit. Queen's Gambit is decline, g6. Now it's like the semi-Slav. Now more precise here, as you can remember, when he does c4, you do c6, the more accurate order. Okay, this is the Slav called, but you don't go to the traditional Slav, but you go with f5 at some point, right? Then you move on with your f5. If you play before you, for some reason, bishop f4, like in the London, let's say he plays the London, you still play e6. Okay, the London system, and then you play bishop d6 and he will go back. And you don't want to exchange the bishop because this is the way he can brew his attack with the London ideas. And so you continue with your same ideas as I explained with white. c6, okay? Now let's say he does e3 or, yeah, London ideas. No knight f6 now. f5. Okay, now he does c3, he plays the London. You play knight f6, bishop d3, castling. By the way, it's very similar to the London ideas, but only the difference is that you lock your own bishop and use the f5 or f4, depending on the color, signature move to further put your knight with two supportive pawns, which is the main ideas, and which I think is even stronger than the usual London, especially as I encompass surprising unconventional opening repertoire. The Stonewall is still famous compared to my other unconventional openings, but is very less known than the London or the Spanish opening. This is a unique system that is very easy to build and very difficult to handle with. So it goes the same as with the ideas I play in white, right? You put the knight over here, this time on e4, and if he takes, you go here, and then he is in trouble, right? And you develop your attack here. You can go even with h5 with the idea to go here to force him. Not h5 now, maybe g6 and then h5 to force him to exchange the bishops. Remember not to block your defense. This is silly mistake that we can make, and I made sometimes in blitz and bullet games, right? Be aware of that. So you can easily make your game, bring afterwards your knight. As you can see, it's a bit slower and less sharp than the white attack. This is why it's not called the Stonewall attack with the black pieces, but rather Stonewall defense. Same ideas, and you have decent approach and you decent game with black pieces, which is great if you are a attacking player, a tactical player like me. You will enjoy this opening. So let's go back to the Queen's Gambit, c3, semi-Slav, bishop. If you exchange, by the way, you exchange, you are good. So you don't have the bishop, but you still have your queen, you have the same structure. The light squares fortress, right? And you bring your knight to double protect this so he cannot enter. e3, f5, bishop, knight, castle, castle, a3. Go then with b4. So you can't do a5 if you want. You don't need to do that. You can go with the same ideas. Knight to e4. Now he can't even do that because you will take him the knight. And if he takes, as soon as he takes here, he is bad trouble because you have the tempi of taking here, opening the file for the rook and attacking his knight, and then all your pieces is synchronized together. Yeah, obviously if you take with that, you have a fork. But this is, of course, nobody will do that. And let's say he moves something like that. Then you can move something like this to open up this bishop. Maybe not at this point. Now it's not that good because you still have tension over here. So you don't want to break that tension. But you can play quiet move like b6 to release this bishop over here, over there. Very nasty, right? If you play like passively, you can simply play like this. And then this also comes into the game and you bring your other rook. You can move like something like that. And let's say you want to get out of the pins, then he comes with this pressure. Or let's say he plays something like a3, you go the same idea. And you have nice attack over here. So this is how you play it with the black pieces against Queen Gambit, against the London system, or other games. Let's say he starts with knight f3. I like to play knight f3, and then you play d5. And if he doesn't play the Tennyson Gambit, which is very rare and very few people will play it, including myself, watch this video. Very surprising opening with the white pieces. Almost nobody is aware of all these tricks that you have, so definitely watch this, the definitive tutorial I made about this opening for the white pieces. But let's say he doesn't do that, and most 90% players will not play the Tennyson Gambit, but they play either e3 or g3 or c4 or bounce back to the traditional d-pawn opening in London or Queen Gambit. Then you know what to do, right? And let's say play e3, you go with the same ideas. g3, g6, bishop. Trying to break you from this side, you don't take it. You go with a signature move f5. Knight, knight. d3, remember, now you don't have it. Okay, castle, castle. And then you can break with e5. Please calculate, maybe it's not good at this point, so because the tension is here is still a bit tricky, because he has some X-ray attack on here with the bishop, you can still prepare it for example, with a knight and go back, strike here. Or, if you remember, the maneuver of this weak bishop to the king side to pin his knight and helping you with the attack. So this was with the black pieces. So that was it, the Stonewall structure to attack very efficiently and surprise many opponents, even advanced players, with the white pieces, also with the black pieces, even though there it's a bit more complex and slow, but it's still very decent approach to retaliate in black. However, you might wonder, what is the best response, most challenging responses for black or for the other side against the Stonewall system? So I want to suggest you two things. One, which is the most common approach against the Stonewall, and another I found against somebody online, and I will share the game with you, so stay tuned with both instances. They are incredibly interesting, and if you play the Stonewall in advanced level, you have to be aware of that and produce some counter ideas to this challenging response. So let's go to the Stonewall development. E3. Now if he does not play knight f6 now, let's say he plays e6, copy, you played bishop d3, and then he plays f5. He plays the Stonewall himself or herself. And so this is actually the best response to the Stonewall system, to Stonewallify the other sides. And you go with your ideas, okay, and he copies you. He copies you and he plays the same systems as you do. You have the favor of the first to play, yet now it doesn't matter now to place this first or castle first, because he's already protected with the Stonewall ideas himself. So play castle, castle. So in this case, this is the most difficult one, because if you goes here, he can place his knight as well in the same very particular spot. So what can you do against that? Some of your ideas, especially if you are white facing the copycat, you can first strike the f4, the g4, right? Maybe not now because the queen can come over and this is dangerous. However, maybe after you do queen e1, preventing his queen to go in there, and let's say he plays something like that, you should not be worried about that because of these two pawns. And then you should go with g4. To break this copycat two Stonewalls against each other. So this is one way to tackle it, the aggressive one and risky one, yeah, because you open up your king very heavily. And if he takes, you should take with your knight, he can move there, but let's say he moves over there, so you can go back, you don't want to exchange pieces, and then move to the side. Then you bring your rook to the attack. And you have the same ideas, right? To move here, and he's locked here because of your attack over h7. But it's nuances, he can play better than what I just suggested here. Let's say he plays now c5, try to break the position, or to, let's say, exchange now. And now take. And now you can't do this maneuver, because now if exchange, now he is slightly better. You can play this and try to, now he's not both protected with two pawns, but just with one, so you can double the attack here. Always adjust yourself to the position. And with the copycat position is the most difficult one. If the queen wasn't here, he has a devastating attack over f2. So you need to be aware, but finally you can break it. Now he cannot protect it with the knight, so he can either flee, and then you can do something like that, which is very strong. And now you can play e4, or maybe first to do king g2 to protect this, and then e4, exchange, and open up your bishop to sacrifice here and bring your other rook. So you have still ideas, but it's more complex and you can get punished on the spots too, so be aware. Other option you have is to go for this maneuver instead. Castle, so maybe before he can place his knight, you simply, as long as he didn't do that, you move out your bishop to the other side. Now let's say he plays that, you run away. Okay, and now let's say play something like that. Then you have the bishop over here. This is some of your ideas further down the line, so you can utilize them later. Let's say you can break it now with c4 and then put your knight over here, or to bring your knight over there. This is another idea. Maybe then g4 at some point. This is the most difficult, challenging response for the other side to play against the Stonewall. But most players will not play the same. More often than not, you're just fine. And now let's go to observe of one of the other options that break this Stonewall, do the impossible. What she did to me, actually, female player, very good one, with the same rating as I had, above 2000s. And so she had very interesting ideas to break my Stonewall system, which I rarely found before, and I wanted to share it with you guys because I want you to learn, first of all, ideas how to beat Stonewall if the other side played it, but more importantly, how to play it yourself to strengthen your structure and to pay attention to the mistakes I did. So let's go over the game. d4, d5, pretty standards, e3, okay, preventing e4, c5, c3, knight c6, f4. Now this is the first idea that she has, very interesting. Rook brought it to the game on the c file, which is very familiar idea from the Sicilian and other openings, but in this case, again, the Stonewall, I haven't faced it and it's pretty strong. Castle, bishop d6, this is very standard, and then the signature move, and this is very interesting move. She had a plan, it's not random here, as you noticed. Queen to b6. Now instead of queen c7, which many players play, kind of try to falsely pressuring my knight, which is all defensive from both. I don't need to bother about that. In this case, she put the pressure on the c file and on my d pawn. So she kind of tried to break this system, which I was not aware of. I was kind of naive and arrogant about, I have my strong system, and this is the first mistake, as you will see next. So I made this usual idea, g4, aggressive idea, which is generally okay, but in this particular case is not accurate. Why? She can just win material. I should have moved with my knight over here, protect this knight, and to give another protection to this d4 pawn, which I missed. Now she took it. I took back with this pawn, which is even worse. I should have, in this case, take with the c pawn, even though the general idea in the Stonewall, as I taught you, is to try to take with the e pawn, right? However, in this case, I should have taken with the c pawn. But in fact, the mistake is already here on the g4. So I needed to move my knight. Anyway, she took, I took back, and now she sacked the knight, but she even could have gained material by simply double capturing my knight, and this way, if I take back, this is pinned to the king. Okay, so she took it, and now she took with check, which is not the best move. She could have even taken here before. However, the move's order is the mistake by the computer, but it's still very strong in human perspective, even though I'm now better in material terms. I moved with my king, which I should have moved way before, because this diagonal gave him the tempi to break my structure in the first place, but it's too late now. Anyways, she took here, which is inaccurate, because now I could have brought my knight to protect this bishop, to attack the queen, and when she run with the queen, then I can grab this pawn, grab this bishop, open the file for my rook, and I up in material, and I will win the game. However, I missed that. Even in the scenario that I did wrong, I could have still won her, but I made another mistakes, and this is the first one in a row. I took here, and now she just could have taken, he also could have taken this, by the way, this bishop, but she took here, it's even stronger, and now I made it, and it's too late now, because now she has this brutal fork of my queen with check. If I take, she just take here with a queen and gain material, and all my king side is ruined, and she is better. So I moved here. I tried something else to be more accurate, but it apparently been worse. So she took her. I thought she might take my queen, and then I would just take her queen, and this knight was trapped. So this was my idea, but of course she didn't miss that, and I took with my king. She brought her rook into the game. This was another inaccuracy. Now the bishop came into the play, and yeah, she just took my rook, castle, tried desperately to exchange queens. She didn't let me to, and then brought the other rook in a battery, and then she brought this check, deadly check, and then false mate in 2 moves. So what is the lesson here? The lesson was that first you need to pay attention to what the opponent does, even in the Stonewall. And if they don't try to just artificially kind of attack this strong knight in the center, which you don't need to pay attention because it's all protected, but if they try to break your d4 pawn and put pressure there, then you need to be aware of that and play knight f3 to double protect that, or to at least move your king to the sides to go away from this diagonal of the queen. This is not typical idea, it's more like an idea of the French defense, to bring the queen here and the rook over there, and yeah, this kind of c5 and all this kind of, altogether it seems like a very French defense idea, but in this case against the Stonewall I've never faced that, and this was the first time, and that was pretty smart from her side, and yeah, and you need to be aware of that. So pay attention to your structure, don't take it for granted. If the opponent put pressure on the d4, pay attention to that. Don't just move with your aggressive idea in the king side, but be flexible and move the other knight, move your kings aside, and so on. So I hope you learned something from these 2 cases, the copycat and this French defense style against the Stonewall with sacking on the center of the board in the d4 pawn. Be prepared for that, and with that you can beat even advanced players. So that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. This structure, very solid, easy to learn, yet very effective and brutal against players who don't know the structure, and even if you know the structure, it's not that easy to play against, both with white and with black, except for e4, as I told you. It's very versatile structure, very easy to develop, and very devastating attack that you develop on the king side and win so many games, as I show you. And so if you want to enlarge your game and take your game to a next level, to gain more points, to reach higher rating ranges on chess.com or Lichess, follow this unconventional list of openings guides that I teach there. First of all, how to respond to e4 with the black pieces, which Stonewall falls short. Second of all, Stonewall is still known to some degree because there are many tutorials, speedruns and so on that revolves about this still unusual opening, but many know that. I have less recognizable openings, like the Nimzovich defense with the black pieces, my secret gambit against Scotch game, Charlie gambit against d4, you name it, many others. Just check it, the list, and we'll see you there. Bye for now.